Welcome to Ethnic Club. Danny Alva
Sierra Sawtell. Said that into two mics.
in Bimbo. Today we speak about 1984 by George Orwell. A cult classic. A very famous book. The title becoming almost a word in and of itself in our modern language. Someone speaks of 1984 and they don't think of Deftones, or not Deftones, they're 90s. Depeche Mode or any other
I was like, where are you going with this?
other incredible album debuts of the year. They think about George Orwell. I've read this book twice now. Once in high school on my own accord, not according to the instruction of any class. And then once again this year after Sierra had read it for her second time. Once because of school, however she was forced upon it for class, which she wasn't able to enjoy it as much because of that. And then
I don't think I had to read it for school.
oh no,
No, I don't think so.
oh, I thought you said you did.
No, I had to read Fahrenheit 451.
Oh yeah, of a similar caliber.
Yeah.
Of course, not as well written, not as graphic.
Not
So-
as enticing.
Yeah. So let's talk about George Orwell's 1984. This book starts off in a very gray town near London, I believe. However, the only thing we know for sure is that it is within the nation of Oceania, one of the three great nations of the earth now. We have Oceania, we have East Asia, and we have Eurasia, which all three are in constant battle with each other. However, depending on how the government wants to make it seem, they're in coercion with one, or they're in team with one and against the other, and constantly changing. Now, all of those dynamics aren't terribly important. They do talk about it in a book that is introduced within the book called
Pause.
doesn't matter. We start off in this gloomy town with Winston. Winston shows what a terrible life it is of a middle class person, essentially, because you have Winston's class, which is the political working class. You have the proles, which is the lower class and makes up the majority of the population. And then you have the upper political class, which is, the one percenters or whatever you want to call them. And they are very few, but they lead and guide everything. And Winston, he goes through what's called crime think. Crime think is a term in a new language that they're trying to create called Newspeak. And they're trying to create Newspeak to destroy Old Speak, which is modern English as we know and I'm speaking now, so that people will literally have less thoughts. One of the key factors of this language is that there is less words with every new edition of this language. They try and create such a simple language so that people couldn't even think against the party. Now, this book was written in the 50s or so, and they were talking mostly against the Soviet Russia and Stalin communism and the flaws with that. The political party in the book is called Ingsoc, which is a newspeak word for English socialism, and it shows how this political ideology is very once had one meanings. However, they admit in the usage of what's called doublethink, a very complex topic that we could go over for hours and hours. However, we'll keep short here. They use this English socialism and convert it into a way of maintaining and manipulating power. And how they define power in the text is the ability to harm people. Let me just go ahead and actually get the exact quote because it is so fucking good. So terrible, I should say. Power is not a means, it is an end. And and power means the capacity to inflict unlimited pain and suffering to another human being. That is all they want. They don't care about anything else other than keeping and maintaining power.
Mm-hmm.
According to Leopold Kohr in The Breakdown of Nations, another wonderful book, which is important to reference when talking about 1984, Kohr states that power is inevitable with size. As a nation grows and grows, whatever their ideologies are, whatever their beliefs are, they're going to change to one thing, and that is the craving of more power and the ability to do whatever it is that they want. And initially, you might have these complicated definitions of power. However, it tends to boil down into smaller and smaller things and smaller abilities, from being able to do whatever it is you want without inflicting it into another person, to literally only what it is that you can do to other people, because that shows ultimate power in this world. When we are able to cut down a tree or whatever, that's a sense of power to a smaller extent. But when you could cut off the head of another person and not be punished for it, it really emphasized the amount of power that you have in that society and culture.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, not even just physically harm so directly, but also in the way they're treated in their society, like the food and things that they're given, where they're made to sleep and things, their inability to do things for themselves. Like, that's also, directly causing harm to a person without having to be so directly violent.
Exactly. Yeah, the world building in this book is incredible, especially with the lack of adjectives that he uses. For whatever reason, I noticed while reading, he uses the bare minimum words required to paint the most deep picture that I've ever seen in any book ever. It's absolutely incredible. However, it does create such a daunting and disgusting feeling when I read it. I did have to read other books while reading this book just because it's so soul crushing. It is very disgusting, and it's something that I'm starting to see in our own society, because here they talk about the critique of Stalinism. However, it's not about the big powers in the East, that being China and Russia nowadays. Like, it's any superpower that comes into being, because the same law applies to everybody. The more size that you acquire, the more craving of power you're going to have. And that applies to the United States. We're growing and growing and growing in terms of population, but more so global influence. The things that we do here through globalization creates influence across other parts through colonistic means. Previously colonialism was done through military pursuits, like Great Britain going into India, China going into Vietnam and Japan, etc., or Japan going into the other places, or whatever the complex history has happened in this world. But now it is more corporate. Coca-Cola will go in, create a factory, colonize the area, and create an industrialized society that was once either hunter-gatherer or, basic agricultural or basic fishing. And they turn these communities into plazas and neighborhoods similar to our own. So through corporate means, colonialization is occurring, and that is just emphasizing the influence and power that we have as a nation, the United States. And as we grow this power, it only creates more corruption and desire for power. Now, all of the things that are happening in the book that are quite disgusting, like Newspeak, the development of this language that has less and less words, the doublethink, where you can simultaneously believe two conflicting variables, yet believe them both to be true in a conscious and unconscious way, is happening. And that might seem hard to imagine, but just to elaborate a little bit, doublethink is believing that 2 plus 2 equals 5. You know that 2 plus 2 equals 4, but you also know that 2 plus 2 equals 5. And you're able to say that in a conscious way, but also be able to unconsciously ignore the logical fallacies within that discussion. And it's to believe in the illogical.
Mhm.
So, how that's presenting in modern society is what has been coined by Eric Fromm as mobile truths. So, mobile truths he discussed in his text, The Sane Society, is this idea where if you're in one place, in one situation, in one scenario, you have these set of truths. However, as soon as your scenario switches, you can completely throw those truths away and believe completely new truths and believe it to be completely logical and reasonable. So, for instance, let's say you're living in the United States and you're, oh, this is the best country in the world, blah, blah, blah. And it has the best this, the best that, the best fish, the best hamburgers, the best cheeseburgers. It has the best. And then you finally move to, say, Brazil or something. And then you become really infatuated with the Brazilian culture. And you believe that they have the best food, they have the best this, they are the best, football, etc., sports. Similarly, if you work for one company at this end of the street, you believe that their product is the best. And then, however, for whatever reason, you go and you switch companies to another one, you believe that their stuff is best.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows how mobile truths can be situational. There is no ultimate truth.
I feel like a way that directly relates to the book to describe it
Mm-hmm.
is the idea that it seems so many people hold, which is the design of capitalism in our society is important and it works efficiently and it works
Mm-hmm.
well and all these other wonderful things. But then also, man, I hate having to go to work for 40 hours a week to not make enough money to be able to survive and,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to own a home and all of these other
I hate being
seemingly.
in so much debt. I hate not
Yeah.
owning anything, actually. I hate
I hate that my job doesn't value me as a person and I'm seen as a cog in a machine.
I hate that I always look forward to Fridays and I fear every other day of the week.
There.
Yeah, that's me now. I'm looking forward to Friday. And I grew up hating the idea that I would be this person where I would only look for. I wanted to be someone who enjoyed every day, had struggles and everything was different and in flux, and I was able to like find the patterns that suited me, etc. And I found a job that I love. As a physical therapist, I get to do what I would rather do over almost anything else. I love being able to be with people. I love being able to make them feel better. I like being able to move the body. I like being able to do manual therapies, exercise, etc. Just learn about the nervous system and things. However, when you do it, for 8 hours a day, day after day, it becomes so monotonous and it becomes just draining. Like we're not meant to be working so many hours in a day. I feel that my ideal schedule would be 4 hours 4 days a week. If I could do just maybe that much, I would be very, very satisfied. And I mean, we learned that we grew up as people through, we'll go over this book later. However,
I think we did.
Yuval Harari,
Oh, okay.
the scientific version of Ishmael. Yeah, I already went over Ishmael. Ishmael says it too, but Yuval says it better in *Sapiens*.
Mm-hmm.
That we as people worked for like 2 hours a day. We'd go hunt, gather some food. We'd gather the vegetables and fruits and eat it and stuff. Like all throughout the day, we'd gather enough food for the day in just a few hours. And then a couple people, we wouldn't eat meat every day. We'd hunt and maybe not catch something that day, but we at least a few times a week we would get a big kill and be able to eat it. It shows that we were eating plenty of meat because nearly all major large-scale mammals went extinct shortly after the introduction of the sapient species into the land.
Mm-hmm.
So we were definitely eating good. But without having to work so hard. We now have to work so much. And the discussion as to why that is for another episode. I want to start initiating the conclusions of 1984.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of strayed very far away from 1984 and the story because we were referring to other things that also hold similar ideas.
Yeah. And I didn't even get to talk about the totalitarian trilogy. So, supposedly, which I learned in the afterword of the book, that this is one piece of a utopian trilogy, utopian or dystopian trilogy, I should say. One being Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, and then the other,
episode soon to come.
Yeah, episode soon to come, Zamyatin's We. So, this one was written in the 20s and has more features in common with 1984 than with Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, though they utilize like brain surgeries to manipulate people. One last conclusion I would like to talk about with George Orwell before I really open up the floor to final remarks is that they don't allow people to believe differently. They traumatize people into being incapable of believing that there's another way. Those who are intellectual enough to veer off get killed. Those who get killed don't just get killed right away. They go through what's called the Ministry of Love, and they're tortured.
What an ironic name.
Yeah, all of their names are very ironic. So you have the main political buildings, or agencies, I should say, Ministry of Love, which is about torture and getting people to confess to different crimes and things and punishing them, etc. It's their jail, their prison system. Then you have the Ministry of Truth, where they go through documentation and manipulate.
It's the news.
It's the news press. So essentially everything that's written and stuff, they go and modify it so that it feeds into the message of what is that they want to say at the time.
The message of Big Brother.
The message of Big Brother. And that message to allow power into the higher political party. Now, there's two others that I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
Yeah. But there's 4, and they all do their separate things. There's like the Ministry of Love, the Ministry of Truth, the Ministry of Peace. That's the productions facility for military weapons and stuff.
Is it?
Yeah. Also very ironic. Anyways, they go and torture you in this place, but they torture you in a way, and that's what actually the second half of the book is mostly about. And I didn't even get to talk about his relationship with the lady character. What's her name? Jennifer or something.
I'm glad you're talking about these things now, because in my brain these are some of like the most appalling parts of this book. You know, the way in which he finds joy and hope through this relationship, but not even just the romantic relationship, but the friendship that he feels he forms with this other person who he thinks he can trust, and feels similarly about the wrongdoings of Big Brother, and then is betrayed by both of them. One of them not purposefully, but the other entirely purposefully.
Yeah, it's Julia, the partner that he acquires, and they have to do so in secrecy because love isn't allowed in their society. Marriage is there, but for the sole purpose of producing children. And he falls in love with this person. They're able to talk about their lives, analyze truths, what's real and what's not real, talk about ambitions and things, plan with each other. Their lives aren't completely manipulated by the party. However, he gets coerced by O'Brien, which is an upper political classman, and he believes that O'Brien is a part of the resistance. And so he agrees to join his resistance. However, the resistance was fake, or at least as far as we know. And O'Brien was just using the idea of him joining the resistance to get him to confess about stuff so that he can put him into the ministry of love and torture him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they don't allow you to just be tortured and killed. They torture you in such a way that they force you into having doublethink. They force you into being unable to crime think. They force you into truly loving Big Brother. And only then do they kill you. But at that point, I don't think they actually kill you. And throughout the book, they say that they do, but the book ends with him alive and in love with Big Brother. And at that point, because he truly does love Big Brother, the main character, Winston, there's no reason for the party to kill him because they've just created, through this expensive process, the perfect citizen. The perfect citizen to this party is one who accepts their torture, two, who accepts nothing else. Like, they just live their life drinking gin and becoming unhealthy, teeth rotting, and then just producing whatever it is that they need to produce, and that's military production. The arms race idea is very important, but we'll talk about that in a longer episode, I think, with the Sapiens, because that's a big conversation that Harari goes over. But I guess to introduce it really quickly is that the only way that a totalitarian society is able to maintain control is via two means. One, establishing a sense of fear, and that is of the world around them, and two, having consistent. Cat is entering the room.
You can't even see her.
You can't.
There she is.
I can't see the picture. Anyways. And two, having a consistent and infallible arms production. So this arms production is what keeps the society alive because it forces people into working for very cheap, yet producing something that is theoretically useless because they can't really use it for anything. So it allows the society to keep staying alive without growing, essentially, from what I understand. I'd have to think about it further to give a better explanation, but that is my thoughts in a nutshell. Sierra, do you have any other thoughts?
I have lots of thoughts.
Go ahead and spit out 2 or 3.
I'm just going to focus on the main thing that I was thinking about, which was the Ministry of Truth and their job to censor what is being consumed by people.
That's very real today.
Right. And that's what I was thinking about, is the connection of that to the way that media works today. And obviously this is not a real book. In some ways it is very real, but it's...
I can touch it.
It's fiction. But what I was trying to say is that we are very lucky to have the opportunity to be able to do our own research, to truly find truth, if you will, to consume as many things as we can, to compare and contrast them, to find the ultimate truth and not just take what's given to us at face value and accept it to be what is real, because by doing that, this is what happens. Maybe not on such a grand scale, but it's important that we use our brains to find what truth actually is for us.
Well, I believe it's becoming increasingly difficult. We're not as lucky as maybe we once were.
Oh, of course not.
For one, like, our media is under attack by the government, and the majority of our media is becoming increasingly controlled by, corporations that aren't about information or sharing. For instance, things like Jeff Bezos, whatever the fuck his name is, he owns so many media production, like so many news outlets like Washington Post or something like that. I don't know. It's ridiculous. He owns some 60% of like the media that we consume on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Disney and their owners control, essentially everything that our children will ever watch.
Mm-hmm.
Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, blah 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 blah.
Yeah, but that's not the absolute truth. You know what I mean?
It's
like
not.
while those things occur, we still have the power to be able to do that research to find what you're talking about and acknowledge the difference that would make in what we're consuming. And that's what I was getting at, is the importance of being able to acknowledge something for what it is. Who owns this company that is telling you this thing to be the truth, and why might they have some skin in the game of that being the truth, and being able to...
But it's not easy to know those things. Like, I don't know who owns most of the consumptions that I watch. Like, let's say I learn mostly from living my life, because I don't have much trust in the media terribly much to like call it true information. I do read off of Wikipedia for scientific facts, and I read texts like research articles and stuff like that for more elaborate information or things that are more important that I do have to really know the truths for. However, when it comes to learning about things quickly, the Google and the YouTube and whatever, those are all owned by the same people more or less, with the same intentions, but I couldn't tell you who those people are.
Yeah, but it's the capacity to be able to acknowledge that you don't know that to be the entire truth because of what you're saying. You don't know who owns these companies, but you do know that Google and YouTube are essentially the same thing, and that AI is largely utilized. That's another thing, is the use of AI and media. But yeah, it's just the capacity to be able to think more broadly than what you're looking at, and just
yeah. And I do think my luxury of being able to do that, but how many people do we know, or can we say that we know, do that actually? And the biggest thing too is our own internal liars, because we have developed biases through evolution and our growth and development, one of which is very profound for this conversation, called confirmation bias, where it is our natural flaw to believe information that supports our current beliefs and ignore information that doesn't. So with that said, for us to really know the truth about something, we have to work twice as hard investigating things that we don't believe are true. So for instance, let's say I believe that immigration is bad and like we should be very anti-immigration. Then it is my duty as an intellectual, as a human being who is supporting our society, to read twice as much research and literature that supports immigration. Because if I just let my life go and read up immigration, the only thing that I'm going to be digesting is the things that support anti-immigration laws and anything else. So anybody who has beliefs but does not work twice as hard investigating the devil's advocate, if you will, probably doesn't understand the truth fully. And I have never ever met anybody in my life, even myself, I know this and I try, and like when I was in school I was able to practice that, but now that I'm just living life and doing things, like I'm reading I probably say equal, like things that go against my view and equal things that go for my view. But the problem is I should be reading twice as much that goes against my view to understand the picture as a whole, because it's going to take that much information or time to combat this internal confirmation bias. So because of that simple fact, I can't say that I know anybody who can really say the truth to anything.
That's a good point. I think truth probably wasn't the right word, but our inability to know the truth, I guess, is more so what I was referring to.
Yeah, and it's kind of dark. It makes it very difficult, especially when you realize that. You're like, fuck, can I trust anything? And there's nothing more scary. And I realized this only 2 weeks ago, but there's nothing more scary than not being able to trust anything or anybody, and it brought me into tears, that realization. Just imagining a world in which that existed was very, very difficult. However, I don't live in that world. I have people and I trust my senses, and most of the people in my life are honest to the best of their abilities. And with regards to these larger, more personal aspects of life, but when it comes to the greater politics of the world, what can we like really, really, really trust when people, especially when they have rulership over such a large area, are only concerned about power, whether they believe it or not. Because personally, I believe they think they're doing good. They think they're trying to help people. Trump, the president before Biden, Stalin, Castro, whatever, all of these people, they're trying to do good. They think they're doing good. They don't they they don't believe they're creating more evil in the world, but there's something inside of them that they can't control or recognize that craves more power. Like they're going to acquire power and then want more of it. And they're going to manipulate their own thoughts and minds to believing what they're doing is right as they get more power and more power and more power.
And this episode is sponsored by Ground News.
I don't know what Ground News is fully, but I hear advertised by Channel 5 News. Fuck the authority.
Channel 5. Okay, yep. Those were some great thoughts. Maybe we cut it here.
Yeah. I highly suggest reading 1984 if you haven't read it within the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely powerful. It's not about just USSR Stalinism. His shit was rough, but it's growing elsewhere, and we're going towards this if we don't make some differences. Quick differences that we could make is buy less things, ride our bike more, and appreciate nature. Period.